So I'm just going to make a short video that will instruct you on how to set up the ICX35 as an OpenVPN client. Now before we go into that, we need to first make some preparations in order to use OpenVPN at our server as well as at our client. So the basic setup is going to be as follows. Now we're going to have our ICX35 that will work as an OpenVPN client that is attached to something on its LAN network. This could either be a PC, like in this case, or it can be an Allen Bradley controller or anything that is a LAN port. Then on the other side, on our server side, we're going to have our OpenVPN server running on a PC. Our OpenVPN server is going to be connected to the internet via a router switch. Now this router switch should have a public IP that this ICX35 can point to, and that public IP has to port forward everything that goes through it to the server IP address. So in order to achieve this, I have set my own router to port forward everything to the IP address 10.194.64.225. And then from my ICX35, I'm going to point to my public IP, and then everything is going to be port forwarded to this address. So what I need to do is I need to put my server at this IP address, which is the IP address of my port forward. Now you need to make sure that the IP address that you're port forwarding to is in a high range, address, something in the 200 range. For example, I have put mine on 225. This is because we do not want a conflict in IP assignment when the router or the gateway assigns IP addresses to everyone else who's going to be connected to the network. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my IP, and I'm going to make it point to this IP address. So we go there and we go to properties, and then we change that. So now once you've set those settings up and you have put yourself on the same port as the port forwarding, you need to make sure that you can still connect to the internet. And clearly we can still connect to the internet. So now once that is done, we're going to make sure a couple of things first. The first thing, we're going to make sure that on our PC we have installed OpenVPN, which I have installed. After you're sure that you have installed OpenVPN, the next thing that you want to do is you want to go and set up your certificates, your client certificates, your server certificates, and your keys. Now in order to set this up, you can go to the OpenVPN website, and that will give you a step-to-step guide on how to set up your server keys, your server certificate, your client certificate, as well as your client keys. And then once those files are set up, you're going to go into your server configuration, and then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to configure your OpenVPN server. Now the OpenVPN website provides a sample of the server configuration file, and in this sample it clearly highlights everything, every step that you need to take in order to set up your server. So everything is highlighted and commented, so you can access that and it will show you what you need to put where in your server configuration. So now once that is done and you've configured your server, the next thing that you're going to do is we're going to move on to our ICX35, and we're going to configure that as an OpenVPN client. So now moving on to the client side, when you're dealing with your client, try to always make sure that the client is on a different subnet than the server. It is not a written rule, but it is just good to have that so that you won't confuse yourself when you're doing your routing in your server and client configuration. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the IP address of our LAN network and put it in a different subnet. Now you want to make sure that the default gateway that you're pointing to is the IP address of your ICX35 client. So once I've set this up, I'm going to click OK, say yes. We want to save this configuration. We can close that, or we can just double check our configuration. Once everything is confirmed, we can close that, we can close this one. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to our process of discovery service. Then we're going to scan to see if we can find our ICX35 module. Once we scan and we find our module, we're going to assign a temporary IP that is in the same subnet as our PC. That window will come up. Then we want it to be 168.168.0. We want it to be on 249. Then we put our subnet mask, and then we click OK. So once that is done, we go to the IP address of our ICX35, including our port number is 8080. Then we log in. Now we are this admin, and the password is password. And then we log in. So once we are logged in, we need to make sure that we are connected, right? Now you can see that with this SIM card that I have a private IP, but if you're working as a VPN client, then you can have a private IP. If you are a server, on the other hand, your IP address must always be public. So once this is done, the first thing that we need to do is we need to change our LAN settings, and then we're going to change this into the IP address that we've just assigned as temporary, 192.168.0. And then once this is done, if we're working as an OpenVPN client, we need to enable DHCP range, and then we're going to give it DHCP values so it can assign the values directly to the device. So we'll give it a range from 100, say, to 150. Then we hit apply. This will cause this module to reboot, and while it is rebooting, we might as well go to our LAN configuration, and then change our LAN connection settings back to obtain automatically. Once we've done that, we want to make sure that everything is working fine. So again, we're going to check if we have an internet connection via the ICX35 at our client side. And we can see here that our DNS probe is not working. So we need to go back to our LAN settings, and then we're going to set our DNS settings. So after we give it a DNS, we hit OK. We click OK there. We can close that. We can close that. We see if we have an internet connection, and as you can see, we have an internet connection at our client side. So the next thing that we need to do is we want to configure our client to act as an OpenVPN client. So we go to configuration, advanced configuration, we go to VPN. Now we are going to choose, we want to use OpenVPN. We are going to put a server IP, which is the public IP address of your server. Then here we're going to input our client files, our client certificates that we made when we were configuring our server. So we go to those files. First we import our CA certificate, that's our certificate of authorization. Then we import our client certificate. Then we import our client key. And then once this is done and we set our IP, then after you set your IP and you click apply, then your module will reboot. At the same time, you want to go and you want to start your OpenVPN server. So we're going to click yes there and run as configuration. We see the OpenVPN icon in the task So once our OpenVPN client is up and running, and we have configured our OpenVPN server, we wait until our OpenVPN server is connected. And then once the server is connected, it's connected to a LAN network, it's going to try and communicate with our module. And we can see here that it is starting to communicate.